today, top 5 natural sleep remedies for better rest. This comes down to essentially there are tricks, there are little things you can do to help improve your sleep, but like I said, it comes down to lifestyle. And if you have a really shitty lifestyle, if you're, never get outside during the day, you're baking in front of a screen and then you're watching TV at night, you can, all the supplements in the world, all the little tricks might help for a little while, but the root cause of you not being able to sleep is your shitty light environment. And I don't think most people really understand how powerful that is. We'll see this with couples that we work with. Say one of the couples is not 100% on board with one side of the partnership is not 100% on board, and isn't real like big on getting the screens off and the lights off. And that person goes out of town for a little while, and the other person, turns all the lights off and gets everything rolling. And that person might wear blue blockers, to mitigate some of that. But, when that partner leaves and they turn all the lights off, their sleep gets even way better, So the light at night particularly is really, really harmful. And our entire modern world, everything in our modern world is basically, I don't think, maybe it's by design, maybe it's not, I don't know, but it's set up so you don't sleep. I mean, you can literally, stay up 24 hours a day. You go to Vegas, the town is lit up. We see the effects of having lights on at night, essentially on animals, insects, mammals, when they're exposed to light, they start adding street lights in neighborhoods, all these different things affect these animals. They affect us as well. Like, most people don't understand that. So they're basically looking for supplements. They're looking for tricks to try and basically mitigate the fact that they're baking under fake light all day. And that really doesn't work well. It's kind of like you have a really crappy, lifestyle. You eat like crap. You don't take care of yourself. You sit all day at a desk, and then you think you're going to go like make up for it with, a couple of hard workouts a week. And it just doesn't work like that. It's the total package. And it's hard. Like, you really have to make conscious decisions to basically live this way. Like, it really is a conscious decision. Like, I get up in the morning. The first thing I do is I go outside. I get in the sun. I go for a walk in the morning. As the day goes on, we don't have any lights at all in the house. At night, if we do need lights in the background, we turn on a red light. I usually face it the opposite way, so it's not super bright. The screens, we try to get off the screens at 8:00. Sometimes you might have to do work a little late. We're blue blockers. We put the screen on dim, but we, generally speaking, have designed our lives so that good morning, sir. We have designed our lives so that we live in an optimal light environment, and that's really the most important factor for sleep. I was just getting into things we can do to improve, but I was hammering on the fact that if your light environment sucks, it doesn't matter how many supplements you take or the little voodoo tricks that you do, your sleep is just not going to be great.
No, it's true. And I think one of the big problems that people face with their sleep is that it goes out the window, and then they get into patterns of dysfunctional sleep. They compensate with things like Lunesta, Ambien, other medications, herbs, supplements, and they don't pay attention to the fact that this means something is terribly wrong.
Or they start caffeinating. They start caffeinating or modafinilling.
Right, that too. In order to compensate with the daytime fatigue that they're struggling from because they have really terrible sleep.
Is that a word, modafinilling?
You just made it up.
I think it's a good word, modafinilling.
And it's one of the reasons why people they don't understand that their sleep may be bad. They wake up not feeling rested, but they think they're having good quality sleep. It's a real problem for them.
Well, that's why the energy drink market is just on fire, right?
I know. But it's part of why we like the Oura Ring. Right. It doesn't lie to us, and it gives us consistent day-to-day data on what's really going on with people, right, which they often have very poor insight into. And it's funny, I just had somebody who asked for basically the executive wellness, executive physical process for us. And they said they don't want to go through the hoops of that process. And the goal is to get them off of a sleep aid.
Mm.
And my response was essentially, we don't have to work with anyone because we have enough interest. And we really want to work with people who understand that this is a process, and that the reason why fee-for-service medicine is failing is that it inculcates this mindset of the next visit, the next remedy, the next prescription, the next dose increase, the next biohack, the next this, the next that.
Right.
This is a flawed strategy, and smart people recognize that it's flawed.
Yeah, we're really selling a lifestyle. That's essentially what we're selling, and we're helping people find a way to incorporate these things in their life without turning their world completely upside down, and not turning them into a somebody who's so stressed out about everything that that causes them stress, so that's essentially what we're doing. And then we're, once we have that foundation down, there's little things we can do to tweak things, but without that foundational lifestyle, like, you're pissing in the wind.
Right. And a lot of it comes down to coaching, because the reality with sleep medicine and sleep aids is that a lot of people wind up not only relying on them, but they don't,
you don't sleep. You're unconscious. That's not sleep.
Well, for the sleep aids, the medicinal sleep aids, but some of them do help people get to sleep. It's a process. It has to involve some behavior change. And if you think you're going to fix your sleep with fancy tricks, you're going to get success for weeks or months or maybe even years, but you're going to fail eventually.
Well, and if you have a good light environment during the day, and you have a good routine at night, and you have a good wind down routine, those magic tricks, like, lowering the temperature in the bedroom, taking a warm shower before bed, maybe some supplementation, some magnesium or ZMA or something like Dr. Kurt Parsley's sleep cocktail will actually work, right? Even better. So you'll enhance your sleep even more. But, if you're living a shitty light lifestyle, or lifestyle in general, eating crappy food, you're eating too late, like, all that stuff is futile.
It is. So on that note, things I like for sleep are, I'll start with basic things like valerian root. I don't like to use kava kava because it has some addictive potential, because it's too much like a benzodiazepine. If someone's already on benzos and they want to lateral onto kava, I might say maybe. Predominantly women end up on benzodiazepines, and there's a reason for that. As their progesterone drops out, their GABA receptors stop working, and so giving them benzos helps them rest, relax, and not be freaking out. And progesterone you can supplement either compounded or over the counter. The compounded is much more consistent, so when I'm dealing with a tough sleep case, that's what I'll use. And you can basically take someone off benzos by giving them enough progesterone. I've never done that personally, but I've heard my colleagues do it in the bioidentical hormone replacement world.
Would that work for men too?
So that's a great question, and I hoped it would. But on talking to Dr. Rosensweet, my bioidentical hormones mentor, about this, he said, look, I talked to Gene Shippen about this, who's one of the, the original mavericks in the testosterone replacement space. And he said, men are not supposed to have huge doses of circulating progesterone going around.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of why men are a tiny proportion of the benzo prescriptions out there. Most of those men are probably using benzos to compensate for other broken hormonal or neurotransmitter systems, which is part of why checking a testosterone is one of the first things I'll do when I'm dealing with a man who's not where he wants to be in life, because that affects so many other things. And you have to remember that, when you run out of something like testosterone, or when your cortisol is wrecked, your DHEA goes next. This is very neuroprotective. It plays an incredibly important role in brain health. And so because of this, a lot of these men, when you give them testosterone, when you give them DHEA, when you give them pregnenolone, their endogenous production of these hormones will improve naturally. It's not a very significant, well, mean, unless you're using pharmacological doses of testosterone, it's not that significant of an effect on any one hormone, but it can be part of the solution to helping optimize someone. And, James asks a great question. Doctor, do you recommend melatonin? If so, is 3 milligrams okay? And my answer, this is another one of the things I'll use for sleep if progesterone hormone replacement doesn't work. And I want to back up actually, because I'm really jumping the gun on the hormone replacement and melatonin side of things. Most people I see struggling with sleep don't even know that they're not eating enough protein. And that protein is critical for the production of the hormones and neurotransmitters that, what's the word I'm looking for? Initiate sleep and sustain sleep. And the same thing with the vitamins and trace elements. And so that's where I'll get an organic acid test. And it was really funny. The other objection that I heard from this gentleman who wanted me to fix his sleep was, I've already had blood work in the last year. And I almost laughed because people think they've had blood work. You have not had the amount of lab testing that I would want to do for you. I cannot remember the last time someone came in having had every lab test that I wanted. I don't even know if it's happened.
Well, I think it's happened with one individual in particular.
No,
that we spoke
I know
to
who
yesterday.
you're thinking about, and he did not.
He did not have everything you wanted.
No,
that was a lot.
I'm
but
aware.
they also don't realize that
a lot of them get the wrong lab tests.
Right. Well, that blood work is only a split second in time too. I mean, it could radically change in one day.
It is.
Right. And that's why we hammer the fundamental habits like over and over and over again. That's really the foundation that everything is built on, right?
Well, it's also why I get hair tissue mineral analysis, because the hair tissue tells you a lot about what's going on with hormonal axes. It tells you a lot about what's going on with mineral balance in the diet. It tells me a lot about what's going on with stress levels. It tells me a lot about what their chronic exposures have been. So if somebody comes in with a really high aluminum level or a really high mercury level or any of the other toxic metals, those metals have accumulated in the brain. They very strongly gravitate towards the brain. And once they're there, they're just constantly creating inflammation, constantly destroying neuronal function. That's why everywhere you look in the literature, neurodegenerative diseases, and sleep is fundamentally a neurological process. So doesn't it make sense that as the brain becomes more toxic and more stressed and more diseased, that sleep deteriorates? This is why you see sleep deterioration in Parkinson's disease. You see it in Alzheimer's disease. You see it in all these neurodegenerative disorders. So if your sleep is going, this is a wake-up call to you. Your brain is going to follow your sleep.
Yeah.
And that's part of why good sleep is so strongly correlated with a long life. Because once your brain goes, Alzheimer's disease, once you've had the diagnosis, you have a 6 to 7 year life expectancy, approximately.
Would you say, summing up your view on melatonin in a nutshell, would you say that you would prefer to get their melatonin from the sun?
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that melatonin production is triggered by the sunlight, as is, the production of serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. And so not getting sunlight and trying to fix your sleep, right. I mean,
but you will use high doses of melatonin from time to time to pull people out of a pattern like you did with me.
Sure. But before I get into that, I want to go back and talk about the labs, because the labs, when you have broken pathways or under-fueled pathways with vitamins, minerals, they're not going to be able to generate the neurotransmitters and hormones that you require for sleep. The cells, the neurons are not going to be able to generate the energy. There's a really funny pattern you'll see with patients. They'll often say, I'm wired, but I'm tired. I feel like I can't shut off and I can't stop going, but I'm tired. I wish that I could, but I try and stop and I keep going.
In the afternoon, they're exhausted, and then they get home and they wake up. Yeah.
A lot of that.
Classic
But
pattern.
also just, we see this all the time. These people who are like, I'm go, go, go. I'm on all the time. Why can't I shut off? Why can't I switch off? That's where the float tank becomes very helpful. And that's why I hate to take cases like where people just say, well, can we do some labs and start some supplements and do some hormones and bada bing, bada boom, my sleep is better.
Or neurofeedback.
Your sleep is deteriorating because of a dysfunctional lifestyle. Your lifestyle is dysfunctional either because or due to some combination of society telling you this is normal, healthy, and appropriate, or you gravitating towards situations that drive dysfunctional thinking, eating, and behavior that then destroy your sleep, right? And so We see that over and over again with our high performers, our high achievers, people who are capable of walking into a boardroom and walking out with $1 million deal, inked and then they, can't control themselves when they drive by the Wendy's.
Yeah.
They
Well, and
just
a
got
lot
to
of that
stop for
comes back.
that Frosty.
Yeah, a lot of that comes back to them being stuck in a certain pattern, just like movement.
Right.
You get
As we
stuck in a
talked
certain
about, yeah.
strategy or blood pressure or whatever. And sometimes, like for us, using neurofeedback or EMDR therapy to help break out of that pattern. A lot of people don't even think about that. I mean, if your brain is stuck in a loop, it's going to be very difficult. One, if you get all the fundamentals down, it's going to be easier for you to be aware of that. It's going to be easier for you to get out of the loop. But sometimes you need a little help to get yourself out of that loop.
Yes.
I mean, and many times just spending a lot of time in nature will help you with that. But sometimes you need a little push, right?
Oh yeah. People need, I wouldn't just say a little push. I mean, some of them need a fundamental rewiring of how they're living their lives, and they almost always don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
It
We didn't
actually
have these sleep issues in the 40s, 50s, 60s because
not the way we do now.
Yeah,
But a lot of that, I mean, there's so many things that have changed, right? Pesticides, herbicides, toxic chemicals. You look how all these affect the brain. They poison neurotransmitter systems. They poison hormone systems. They ruin energy generation in neurons. They directly destroy organ system function, which then drives more of these patterns of dysfunction. Look at the liver. Look at the kidneys. When the liver and the kidneys have had a gradual accumulation of toxins, there's a decrement in their function. You may not see it on your lab work. It may not be profound enough to put you into renal failure or liver failure, but you're not eliminating toxins as well as you were. That means that the ones you're accumulating are tending to reside in your brain, and this is going to wreck your sleep. So, I mean, you look at the cases of heavy metal toxicity in general. One of the hallmarks is that people have poor sleep and they go a little bit crazy. That's why the old saying "mad as a hatter" has to do with mercury poisoning. And hatters, men who are making hats, they used mercury-based products in order to do that, and they would wet the felt tip pens that they used in order to make the hats with their tongue. So they were literally ingesting small quantities of mercury every single day, and it drove them mad. So anyway, once we have
we don't recommend that. We don't recommend.
Once you have all the hormone and neurotransmitter pathways online, and at least there's some semblance of metabolic health come back into the picture, that's when you'll sometimes run into cases where people are still not able to sleep, not able to resolve their issue. And that's when using things like higher and higher doses of progesterone, higher and higher doses of melatonin, I think becomes appropriate. I often get the objection, well, what about feedback loops? Somebody asked me that, I think it was yesterday on my Monday masterclass, which if you don't know, I have a masterclass on Mondays where I dive into a particular topic. It's streamed here. There's a Q&A after for my premium Substack subscribers. It's only $20 a month. I encourage you to sign up and upgrade. And it's usually a 30 to 45 minute Q&A. And the question was, what about these feedback loops? What are you doing when you're putting huge doses of melatonin into the body? And with some of these things, it seems like we can get away with this ad infinitum. And with some of them, we have to be a little bit more careful. And sometimes it's a matter of how long you're going to use it for. So for example, men can go on testosterone for a short period of time and get away with it so long as they're judicious in their dosing. But the longer they're on it and the more gear they're on, whether it's testosterone, other anabolic steroid hormones. Jim's got his hand over his face like this is like he's how do you feel about that, Jim?
Am I frozen? I just wiped my face because I'm sweating
for a minute, but it looked like you were like covering your face like, oh
no, it wasn't that. I wasn't saying that. No.
But it's true that
it's true. Like people, this happens with growth hormone, right? So you look at the anti-aging marketplace and they'll tell you like, if you don't do growth hormone, it'll shut your natural production down. Well, if you're taking 1 IU or 1.5 IUs a day in the morning, it's probably not going to shut your testosterone down. But if you're taking 20 IUs 4 times a day, like some bodybuilders do, yes, you will shut your growth hormone down. So, the poison is in the dose, right? And so, that's, and with HRT, what we've learned is that if you take it with a cream or if you're taking it in smaller dosages, pulsed like your normal production would be, you're not going to shut down your natural production as much as if you took, like these guys that would, like I used to do, take 1,000 I think I did 1,000 milligrams a week once or twice, but they took 1,000 milligrams a week. That constant 1,000 milligrams in your system is going to shut your system down. But if you're throwing in, like with a cream, you're doing, 15, 20 milligrams every day.
Yeah.
In the morning, when you would normally produce that, it's not going to throw off your natural production as like having 1,000 milligrams in your system 24/7, right?
Well, the
So
other
if you
thing,
if you get a big whack of melatonin one night, when for me it was like what 300 milligrams,
300 was what
and I
you
take
finally
that,
did.
and it gets me out of that loop, and it helps me get back into sleep, and then I stop doing that. My body's gonna go back into making its it's kind of like slapping somebody in the face to get their attention, and especially if you're getting your morning light, and the people start
I describe it as hitting the reset button, which is a little bit more polite.
Right. Yeah.
You,
Slapping
of
someone in
course,
the
would
face is
say
kind of like hitting the reset button too, but probably get in
that's
trouble
so
for
you,
that.
Jim. That's so you.
That'd be headbutting them in the face.
Right.
That's not the reset button. That's the we don't want to deal with you anymore button.
So yeah, on that note, a lot of this depends on context, right? So let's say that someone's had an acute accident, injury, something bad has happened to them. They're going through a very stressful period, right? And we look at their hormones, we look at their sleep, we say, wow, it's trash. We need to help you. We give them high dose melatonin, we give them some hormone replacement, particularly if they've had a head trauma, things like melatonin. I actually haven't looked into this. I should look into whether or not melatonin's been studied for its help, for its effect in acute head trauma, but it's so neuroprotective. I'd be shocked if it didn't have a beneficial effect.
I would think so because of the anti-inflammatory effect, wouldn't it?
I would think so, and that's why I put DHEA and pregnenolone in my my acute trauma protocol. By the way, some of these protocols, like I have a jet lag protocol, I have a acute trauma protocol. I put those in the premium Substack if you want. That's why it's $20 a month. These are,
and just as a disclaimer, his jet lag protocol works incredibly. Like he came back from Thailand and didn't skip a beat.
time difference.
Yeah. I actually had to tell him, like, dude, like, slow down a little bit. You just traveled halfway around the world. You might want to slow your roll a little bit.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild how well it works. So when someone's had that kind of acute injury or insult, using hormones acutely can help maintain their normal physiology so that they can recover better.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I haven't really, well, it's a tough question to answer. And the question is really, how do different injuries, patterns of injury, toxin exposures affect the body's ability to produce hormones? Because we'll see people who don't have the capacity to produce cortisol, who don't have the capacity to produce testosterone. When you leave them without these hormones, they feel horrible. They're depressed. They're tired. They can't stop urinating. I mean, in the old world, like 100, 200 years ago, these people would just die. I mean, that's what would happen. And today we have exogenous hormones. The first example, this best example of this was insulin. I mean, when before insulin, type 1 diabetics would just die. They would start to urinate. They would urinate uncontrollably because of the hyperglycemia. They would waste away. They'd lose all their muscle mass, and then they would die. And it was really tragic. And insulin, in that respect, has been one of the greatest discoveries in the history of medicine. It's funny because it's actually the first peptide therapy, technically. Now peptides are taken off. They're really all the rage. But insulin was one of those the first peptide ever used by injection therapeutically. And where I was going with that was hormones, neurotransmitters, sleep, insulin, peptides. I lost my train of thought, Jim.
Sometimes you got to prop people up, especially if they can't, like people with head injuries or like football players.
Right. Well, that's where I was going with that. Yeah, is that I question, you'll see people who've had a lot of head injury have terrible hormone levels. At what point and what is the actual reason for that? Because the terrible hormone, there's almost never one thing in their past that makes this a problem for them, right? Let's say they're in the military, micro concussions, the emotional, psychological trauma of combat. You look at the heavy metal loads in combat zones, they're insane. The U.S. military uses depleted uranium rounds. They do have a slow radioactive decay process. And that means that all of the war zones we've ever been in where we've used these shells are completed with are contaminated with radioactive waste. That's part of why, and they don't talk about this on the mainstream media because it would make our war machine even more unpopular. But that's why there's epidemics of cancer in places where the U.S. military has spent a lot of time, and that's part of why these populations hate us. They say, "Wow, it wasn't enough for you to come and kill a bunch of people. You had to contaminate our environment in a way that is basically impossible to clean up, so that now our kids are going to have fetal malformations." Our adults are going to get cancer and die at young ages. I mean, it's really tragic.
I can't remember how many people a day still die in Vietnam from stepping on an unexploded ordnance.
Yeah, well, that's part of why we banned those things. That's part of why it's so heinous that they're thinking about sending cluster bombs over to Eastern Europe.
Well, not only that, but the Agent Orange, like they just absolutely destroyed. I mean, Vietnam is an amazingly beautiful country.
It is,
and we leveled it like a parking lot. For nothing. So this is definitely getting demonetized for sure.
Anyway, back to sleep. People don't, in that equation, right? Somebody comes to me who's got a history of using or of exposure to munitions or toxic chemicals and head trauma and working at night. I mean, what do I blame for their hormone dropout? What do I blame for their dysfunctional sleep? I don't really blame anything. I identify all the contributing factors. I look at the labs. I treat the labs. I fix the lifestyle. And it's a process. That's the other thing that really bothered me about this guy. I said, look, I don't want to go through the executive physical process. I just want to go visit to visit. I said, look, anyone selling you an opportunity to fix your sleep with them visit to visit is just going to sell you one remedy and hack and protocol after another until they run out of tricks in their bag. And then you're going to, basically say, well, what was all this worth? Why did I do this?
You should have told him that I'd come over and put him in a sleeper hold every night before bed. $1,000 each time. I'll just put him in a rear naked choke and out he goes.
You better be careful advertising that, Jim. You might get the wrong kind of people asking you for that service. And
the funny thing is we used to do that when I was in elementary school. We used to like knock each other out. We used to like grab each other's throats and like hold them until they'd pass out and they'd lay on the ground and you'd hold their feet up until they woke up again. Yeah, it was very different times. Yeah. So
on that note, it's time to get on with the day. Thanks everyone for watching. Oh, did you mention that we have a thyroid webinar coming up?
I did at the beginning. We can mention it again. It's the link to the actual webinar itself. Is we're going to tell you all about the thyroid course and how it's going to help you.
We are.
Get the reminder on that. Of course, Stillman Wellness is where our coaching program is. Stillman MD is where the medical side of things are, and of course, we've got our link trees are both down there, so you can check out all sorts of different things, our retreat in Nicaragua that we're doing in January, all the good stuff that we have going on, and all our social media is in there as well. So please let us know if you have any questions, any topics you'd like us to cover. I'm in the process of doing the topics for the rest of the month, so throw that in there if you want to see something.
Are we in the process of taking reservations for the Nicaragua retreat yet, Jim?
Oh yeah, that's been open for a long time.
No, I know that, but you said you had a page you wanted made for it that hadn't been.
Yeah, we're cleaning it up. It should be done in the next day or two. And that way, the page we have that's on our link tree is okay. It's just not. It's just.
I get it. Yeah. Just not, come to Nicaragua with us. It's going to be a great trip. Yeah.
It's just not. If we're going to promote it to, like, when we start promoting it hard here with Mr. Stan Efferding.
Yeah.
Here in next week or two, I really want the page to look a little bit nicer if millions of people are going to see it.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Take care. Have a great day. Don't forget to get outside.
Indeed.